Welcome to Galaxy Brains.
An infinite amount of cash.
I'm your host, Alex Thorn.
The U.S. banking system is sound and resilient.
Bitcoin made a new all-time high.
If you're not long, you're short.
Satoshi's going to come on there, laugh hysterically, go quiet. All Bitcoin's going to be erased.
Bitcoin's the best crypto asset.
Bitcoin is going to zero.
Welcome back to Galaxy Brains. As always, I'm your host, Alex Thorn, head of firm-wide research at Galaxy. This is the next edition in the Nashville Tapes. We're here at the Bitcoin conference, and we're talking with Dylan LeClair, Chief Bitcoin Strategy Officer at Metaplanet, Market Intelligence Analyst at UTXO Management. We're going to talk with Dylan about enacting the MicroStrategy playbook as a public company, what's happening in the market, and what his impressions are of what's happening here in Nashville for Bitcoin 2024. Let's get right to Dylan. Before we get to the show, I need to remind you, please refer to the link to the disclaimer in the podcast notes and note that none of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice or an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by Galaxy Digital or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. Welcome to Dylan LeClair, Director of Bitcoin Strategy at Metaplanet, Director of Market Intelligence at UTXO Management. Dylan, thank you so much for coming on Galaxy Brains.
Thanks, Alex. Happy to be here.
We had a fun time at the MicroStrategy conference in Las Vegas a couple months ago. What was your take on Michael Strategy? Michael Saylor, MicroStrategy. It's not a bad joke there, Michael Strategy. on Michael Saylor in general, he's vindicated, isn't he?
Oh yeah, for sure. I was under the bit of naive impression that the playbook that they have pioneered would have taken off in 21, 22, 23, and obviously I think after they escaped the bear market, it was like, okay, they survived. The market cap's 20x'd. Like it's it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And so I think this cycle is among other things, obviously, we have presidential candidates going to be talking about Bitcoin and tomorrow, and a whole bunch of stuff on the landscape that is positive ahead. But I think among other things, the public corporate adoption narrative is not even narrative, just reality is going to be a big driver.
Yeah. What is the strategy? Will you just lay it out for our audience real quick? The MicroStrategy strategy. What?
Well, yeah. I mean, so there's a couple different kind of layers to it, right? Levels, I would say. Level one is just you buy a little bit of Bitcoin. A company like Square, who has, Cash App is a great Bitcoin product. They have a hardware wallet. They do great stuff. Their Bitcoin team's amazing.
Yeah.
But in terms of their treasury allocation balance sheet, it's like 5 to 10% of their balance sheets in Bitcoin.
So just holding some,
just holding a little
sure
bit,
you have
right?
Exposure.
Yeah, have some exposure, right? Don't have all of your liquid capital in T-bills.
Yeah.
Right. I think level two is you have a bigger Bitcoin allocation, and you maybe even have gone to the public market and done, say, an equity issuance, right? Because I like, there's a practice where, take any market cap for any company you're looking at, any valuation. It can even be a private company, and it's in dollars, $1 billion, and flip that, change the denominator to Bitcoin. And in a world where we're going 10 years from now, your company today is probably overvalued in Bitcoin terms.
Yeah.
So if you're a public company and you look at your market cap and it's, say, 10,000 Bitcoin or 100,000 Bitcoin, if you look and you think the world that we're going to 10 years from now, maybe it's not worth that much Bitcoin. The rational thing to do would be maybe issue equity and buy Bitcoin. So level two is like maybe you have, instead of 10% of your balance sheet in Bitcoin, you have 50 or a little bit more, or you've gone to the market and you've done something like maybe a Semler where they filed a shelf registration. Mm-hmm. Just yesterday, Eric Semler was saying, yeah, the SEC has had some comments for us, but they've said, hey, we're gonna go have $50 million at the market facility, sell equity, buy Bitcoin. Level two. Level three is basically what MicroStrategy has done, right? Which is we're not going to put 80% of our balance sheet in Bitcoin. We're not going to put 100%. We're going to put 120%.
Yeah.
We're going to be levered Bitcoin vol, and we're going to go out and we're going to sell that volatility. We're going to sell that volatility through convertible notes. We're going to borrow at zero, and we're going to loop it back into Bitcoin. And it's like this idea of accretive dilution, right? And like that is, I think, the ultimate form of this strategy, right? But I don't think that will be adopted in mass, right? It's kind of like it's kind of like you have to go to step one first.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing that he really launched into this so quickly once he started too. I mean, I remember Matt Walsh found this filing in like summer 2020, and it was pretty doldrums too, right when this happened. You know, the halving had just happened. We were in COVID, but Bitcoin really didn't start to move seriously until the fall.
Yeah, it was like 9K for like 3 months.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like, and then he's like, this company like MicroStrategy is like buying Bitcoin, and we're like, and then nothing really happened in the market. And I remember being like, you know, I when I was first at Fidelity, like, I mean, now a long time ago, like I was like, oh, I remember that company. There was like some system I opened occasionally that would be like MicroStrategy, and I was like, who is this company? That strategy is super interesting. There's people that wanted. What I thought was that it was going to degrade after the ETFs launched, and it hasn't yet. Really at all. But the idea was that before the ETFs, there wasn't a publicly listed equity-like vehicle or equity wrapper to get Bitcoin exposure other than mining stocks and MicroStrategy, basically.
Yep.
So I thought some of the monetary premium of MicroStrategy would get drawn out, but we haven't seen that yet. But you are now the chief Bitcoin strategy officer, or the something like that, right? That's close enough, right? The name for Metaplanet, which is one of these, and I don't think they'd be offended to hear this, but what Michael Saylor even called his own company, a zombie company, that is now running this playbook in Japan. What do why? What are you guys doing?
Well, yeah, and you know, that's literally out of the words of Simon Garovich yesterday on a panel, and he'll say it. It was a former commercial real estate company, still has a property, but COVID happened and the restructuring happened. But essentially, the idea came from the fact that Japan's a massive market, massive bond market and equity market. The tax laws in Japan for crypto, Bitcoin, are pretty hostile. It's ordinary income, miscellaneous income, so it's up to 55%. For listed securities, it's a flat 20%. The yen and the macro environment there, the financial repression there, you know, interest rates at 0 on the short end, 1% on the long end, debt to GDP, the highest in the world. And the fact that there's no Bitcoin proxies in Tokyo. There's none. There's no ETFs, there's no miners, there's no MicroStrategy, and everybody in Japan has a brokerage account.
Yep.
So there's like kind of all these stars aligned. We had, you know, long story short, met Simon. They did a round, but we joined and, you know, basically published a manifesto, you know, released it on the Tokyo Stock Exchange disclosure system in English and Japanese, and said, look, this is the plan. We're going to use all the tools available to us in the public capital markets. You know, we've come August 1st, we're increasing our authorized capital by 3x. Meaning that we'll have equity to issue with, as disclosed, with the intent to buy Bitcoin. We've already issued 1 billion yen in bonds, which isn't much, right? It's just the start of it, the strategy, but you know, like 6-7 million, but at 50 basis points, not convertibles, right? This is just, and so I think the idea is to just lean into this and lean into this really hard. And give basically Japanese investors and, you know, some international investors too have the ability to access this exposure to Bitcoin. And the market so far has perceived it very, very well. Yeah,
I saw it's been quite a story. I think it was the best performing equity in Japan over the last quarter or something like that. I forget what the chart said, but and of course it's not financial advice for anybody listening, but just those are the facts as I'm aware of them. Very interesting. So let's talk a little bit about so you work in the Bitcoin magazine diaspora, I'm going to call it, right? I mean, UTXO is David Bailey and fund, right? Investment fund. You still work at Bitcoin Magazine. It's technically, right? Or
yeah, a lot of roles, you know.
Yeah. What do you think about the Bitcoin conference so far? I know it's sort of just getting started, right? We're recording on Friday, July 26th, but it's already been quite a scene.
Yeah, quite a scene. I mean, yesterday was industry day, so I think it was like 25% of the people that we expect today. I feel like there's just so far, you know, this morning there's been a great energy.
Yeah.
I think people are really excited. You know, the buzz about Trump and all of that. I think, again, for me, it's very much not even a red team, blue team thing. I think it's just about you know, I've been coming to these. This is my 4th conference, you know, hosted by BTC Inc.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 21, 22, 23, 24.
And, you know, the first 3 in Miami.
Yep.
Aside from the ones in Europe or Amsterdam.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, this is the biggest one. I think has the most national attention. It has, I think, the biggest potential implications. nationally, potentially geopolitically, right? I
Yeah.
mean, just like I think Matthew Pines had a great point. We were in a space a month ago, and it was like after the meeting with the miners.
Yeah.
That
At
Trump
Mar-a-Lago,
had.
yeah.
And Trump comes out and says, basically we want to keep Bitcoin mining in America. It's good for our energy. And Matthew, basically a really smart guy, said the first thing he said was, first thing I thought of is think about all the intelligence agencies globally that have to write a brief about what Donald Trump just said to their superiors.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
And so like whether you're, an adversary of the US, whether it's Russia, China, Iran, anyone that's at threat of like sanctions risk, or just even allies, right? Where they're saying, look, this is the world reserve currency. Trump in betting markets has 60% chance to win the presidency. What does that say, right? And I think people that got mad or upset that, Orange Man was saying this and because they dislike his views or he's mean or whatever, missed the point that this is like just completely shifts the Overton window where Bitcoin was pretty irrelevant in 2020. It was not even close to this stage, and now it's we're in the big leagues.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no turning back.
There isn't, and we were excited in 2021 about a video of a Central American president announcing that Bitcoin would be legal tender.
Yeah,
and all power to El Salvador. They've done well with that strategy as well. Amazing story. But now you've got the former president coming to speak. You've also got RFK Jr. speaking here today, who's polling at about 10%. He was at the Karate Combat last night with where Nick Carter defeated Cody Kuhn. I was thinking about Trump and him saying that. Remember when he was at the UN and he was lecturing Germany about how they were overly dependent on Russian natural gas, basically? And they laughed at him.
Yep.
They laughed at him. Yes, completely vindicated. Germany effectively still, in an energy crisis, at least strategically for them at this point now, with the war in Ukraine and having to be so anti-Russia. I wonder, and I hope for the sake of those intelligence agencies, policymakers, that they don't laugh at that, because honestly, I'm more certain than I ever would have known about the implications of Russian natural gas in Germany. More certain about Bitcoin in 5 years. I'm pretty sure if Trump does embrace Bitcoin after and wins and does embrace Bitcoin, and people don't take it seriously, then we're going to be having the last laugh again in 5 years on Bitcoin.
Yep, I totally agree there. This is the big leagues, right? And so I think even Trump wins, loses, or a third worse option, this is a point of no return.
It has been leveled up.
Yep.
It's really quite insane. Yeah, and I agree, adversary or ally.
Yep.
If the U.S. has any type of national Bitcoin strategy, even if it's not to buy and hold it,
don't sell our current Bitcoin.
Even if they do, even if they just adopt a more friendly attitude towards the Bitcoin industry, that's the one thing too. What are your thoughts on the Bitcoin strategic reserve idea? I have some, but I'll offer mine if you want, but I'll let you go first.
It's crazy because a lot of I don't want to say memes, but there's all these Bitcoin people, and they'll say things years in advance that are just radical and crazy, and they look like lunatics and sound like lunatics. And then 3 to 4 to maybe 5 years later, it's like, is this maybe going to happen?
Yeah.
And so I don't have a strong opinion one way or another. I don't know what he's going to say. I don't think anybody does.
Yeah.
Anybody claiming to know what's going to come out of Trump's mouth doesn't.
That's true outside of Bitcoin also.
Yeah. No, totally.
Yeah.
I think Trump's going to go up there. He's going to feel the vibe of the room. If it's electric, he's a wild card.
Yeah.
In the best way, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. I know. I think I was talking with you or someone else where, I think I was talking with you, exactly what it would look like what regulatory body or what part of the government does this fall under?
Right. That's a fun question. What
are your thoughts?
It's a nerdy question.
Yeah.
Well, I have a couple. One is that I don't believe that he will or should announce that it's part of some attempt to hedge or protect the dollar. I don't think it should be backing the dollar with Bitcoin.
Yep.
If you announce that we're going to back the dollar with popsicle sticks, the dollar's going to crash. There's no need. Fiat currencies, especially reserve currency, is a confidence game. There's no reason to suggest that it's weak. I don't believe that there is any reason to suggest it's weak, right?
Yep.
I do think it's weak, and we also know the Trump administration will want a weaker dollar for the manufacturing base, but they don't want to spiral it out of control.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that. That'd be terrible for Americans. So I think if they buy it, it should be done for different reasons. Perhaps, say, geopolitical competition, international trade. Not specifically, it shouldn't be done out of the Treasury. It shouldn't be done out of the Fed, right? Because then you're just hurting the dollar for no real reason when you could just also stack for a different reason. That's one view that I have. The other one is that I'm kind of annoyed about the hype over this because I really don't think this week or this conference or this moment in Bitcoin history needs this. And we're almost certainly going to be disappointed. I don't think there's really any likelihood, really, that the U.S. embarks on a meaningful, El Salvador Bitcoin strategy.
Yeah.
And I don't think we have to. And I don't think Bitcoin needs it at all. So, to me, it's like a little bit like hopium that is most likely going to disappoint. Whereas, the fact that two presidential candidates are speaking at the Bitcoin conference, that Kamala Harris was interested and looked into speaking here, that's good enough,
Yeah. No, I mean, we get ahead of our skis, and I say we as I know we're not some homogeneous collective, but
there are definitely some permeating unspoken narratives that pick up real fast, and we all sort of think about it in the Bitcoin world, even across the various bubbles and spheres of Bitcoin influence. I think it's fair to say that we Bitcoiners do often get ahead of us. But to your point, I mean, a lot of what people have been saying for years gets less crazy every day.
Yeah, and again, I think it's about just the fact that this is a conversation shifts the Overton window and what's politically palatable at the time, right? If we're here in 2024, what does the 2028 election look like? Trump, Kamala, probably Trump's out of the picture at that point, but whoever's next, right? This isn't going to go away. I think just with the voting block, which may or may not be a bit overestimated, I'm not sure. The size of the single issue voter block, the size of what's not underestimated is the amount of donations that have come in, right? And say what you want about the left, they're smart enough to realize they don't want to get on the other side of a growing wall of capital.
And they don't need to, right?
No.
This is one of the things that always confused me about Elizabeth Warren, her level of vitriol and her wing of the Democratic Party's level of hatred of crypto.
Yep.
I don't think there's a lot of people who are going to the polls to vote against crypto. It doesn't seem like a real good political issue.
No.
I mean, obviously there have been at this point innumerable violations of consumer safety across the broader crypto complex, and I get that that's bad, and she herself has been a consumer safety and protections advocate. But politically speaking, I just don't see it as and of course there's plenty of good actors as well. So I think that is pretty durable. You're right. The money speaks in American politics. It is speech in American politics.
Yeah, I mean, look, the underbelly of politics isn't some it's not a beautiful eloquent thing. It's right. It's politics is a gross game.
It's the art of convenience and compromise, right?
This is, if you want to. I think for the longest time, Bitcoin, crypto. It is technologically apolitical, but for the longest time, it was very much it was a reactive, defensive position. And I think, RFK spoke in 2023. I think that was the first little inkling of okay.
That was a good speech.
It was a great speech.
Yeah.
And I think, I got to give a shout out to David Bailey because, it was perceived, at least, from the start, at least for me, a bit of a leap of faith where, he was we're going hard on this. And it was tweeting about it, and he was in March was Trump keynote, and everyone was haha, haha, good joke.
He manifested it.
And no, David went hard in the paint for months.
Yeah.
To make this happen. And so, again, think what you want, say what you want about Trump, but this is a big moment, and I think this, going ahead, regardless of what happens with, whatever people think he's going to say or whatever's actually put into policy this next term or whoever wins. But I think, this is somewhat of an inflection point for Bitcoin in the, in the regulatory lens, in the political lens, the geopolitical lens, of how we look at this.
Absolutely it is. Would you think Satoshi would be surprised to Well, I think he'd be surprised if you just said that it was Trump specifically, right? But I mean, that 15, 16 years after creating and ideating Bitcoin, that there'd be a 25,000 person conference that the former president is speaking at.
Yeah, I mean that's crazy, right? I mean, there's going to be billions of views of Trump saying something about Bitcoin with Bitcoin 2024 logos behind him.
Yeah,
billions of views.
Yeah, wow, wow. Yeah, it's wild.
It's big.
Before we wrap, what are your thoughts on, do you have any have you been following the macro situation? I saw they just revised inflation, slightly higher PCE. It looks like cooling of the economy it was minor, right? But all the data seems to be turning towards a cooling economy now. And what do you think we're going to get some rate cuts anytime soon? How do you think about that? And also, does Bitcoin care?
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin it's correlated with all the risk until it's not, right? And we've certainly seen a bit of a bump in the last week or two, against risk that got hurt a little bit.
Right.
Look, I was someone in 2022 that was very bearish on the state of things, and was actually right for a good amount, and bearish into 23 just given the fiscal, the monetary tightening. Right, and just the fiscal stimulus and the fiscal impulse, and people like Lynn Alden, just completely nailing that kind of regime flip of fiscal dominance. Mm-hmm. Right, I think even if we get a little bit of a minor downturn, the Biden regime going into the election and then post-election, neither one of them is going to be tightening the belt fiscally.
I don't think so. Right.
So even if you get a little bit of a downturn, a little bit of a uptick in unemployment, they're both, it's like welfare state regimes, fiscal stimulus regimes on both sides.
Yeah, I think Trump at the RNC said he was going to rein in the deficit and cut taxes. And I was like, pretty sure that's impossible. Everyone knows that. I don't know if everyone does. Maybe not everyone watching that speech, but everyone in finance, politics, policy, Washington, everybody knows that's impossible.
Yeah. So, no, I mean, I don't think there's any material, there's no need to be bearish, or, maybe there's a little 10, 20% downturn, but that's a walk in the park in this world. So,
well, Dylan, I guess one last question, since this will air after we're about to go on stage and ask, is this the end of the 4-year cycle? What are your quick thoughts on that?
It's not the end of the cycle. I think, the 4-year, bull bear, again, it's somewhat of a meme, and I think there's a lot of things in Bitcoin that work until they don't, right? We don't go below the all-time high, but the 200-week moving average, and we kind of keep
sad. The prior all-time high, that one was sad. I was upset about that one.
Yeah, it was a good. It
wasn't really organic, I don't think, but yeah, that one was not. It was not great. That was like FTX force selling that brought us down there, but that one did kind of hurt. That was nice to always say.
Yeah. And so I think we keep kind of slaying these prior preconceived notions. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll have a good talk, though.
Yeah,
I'm excited for it.
Well, Dylan, my friend, thank you so much for coming on Galaxy Brains.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Galaxy Brains, the weekly podcast from Galaxy Research. If you enjoy the show, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To follow Galaxy Research, sign up for our weekly newsletter at gdr.email, read our content at galaxy.com/research, and follow us on Twitter at GLXYResearch. See you next week.